Good afternoon, all. Thank you for joining us. My name's Andrew Watkins, and I'm the Director of Programs and Innovation with Mindgardens Neuroscience Network. Previous to this role, I worked for over 20 years in public mental health services and specialised in areas like early psychosis and physical healthcare. I would love to take this opportunity that we've got here just to acknowledge the strength and resilience of Aboriginal and Torres Strait Islander people who are the traditional custodians of the diverse countries on which we're joining today's meeting. I am lucky to come from Gubbi Gubbi country here today, and I pay my respects to elders past, present, and extend that respect to all Aboriginal and Torres Strait Islander people that might be present today. I also think it's really important to acknowledge people with lived experience of mental ill health and recovery, and also the experience of those people that have been carers, families, or supporters, and acknowledge the role they help in shaping future mental health care. Welcome to the Mindgardens Psychosis Webinar Series, which is part of the Mindgardens Tertiary Referral Service for Psychosis, or TRSP. TRSP, for anyone that's not aware, is a statewide service funded by New South Wales Health and hosted by South Eastern Sydney Local Health District. Mindgardens is very grateful to SESLED and New South Wales Health for their ongoing support of TRSP. A little bit about the TRSP. It aims to improve lives of people living with complex psychosis. It does so through delivery of a clinical service which welcomes referrals from right across New South Wales of anyone living with psychosis and receiving care from public mental health services. It also runs education and training programs like this today to build capacity in caring for people living with complex psychosis. This webinar is supported by Mindgardens Neuroscience Network. And for those that might be unfamiliar with us, Mindgardens is a partnership between our foundation members, Neuroscience Research Australia, the Black Dog Institute, UNSW Sydney, and South East Sydney Local Health District. Mindgardens was established in 2019 to enhance the collaboration between its members, bringing together clinicians, researchers, and health service administrations, together with people with lived experience to design research and quality improvement projects that can be translated into everyday practice, matching consumer priorities, and can make a real difference to people's lives. These psychosis webinars will continue to run throughout 2025 monthly, so please look out for emails from Mindgardens, which will deal with future webinars, which we aim to tailor for all clinicians. A little bit of housekeeping for the rest of the webinar. You will have seen a couple of poll questions go up during my introduction just now, and there'll be a couple more, and we'd really appreciate you answering those. There will also be some poll questions during the presentation about today's topic. Your answers are anonymous, and they help us constantly improve these webinars. We'll be saving time for a Q&A session at the end, so please enter any questions that you might have into the chat box rather than the Q&A, so just in that chat line. If we don't get a chance to answer your questions, please also share them with us, because we can come back to with answers for you, and also please share any future ideas that you have for webinar topics. Those details we'll put up at the end of this. Our contact address we'll put up at the end of the presentation. And finally, it's my great pleasure to introduce two fantastic speakers today, both Dr. Justin Chapman and Professor Simon Rosenbaum. Justin, firstly, is a lived experience research officer at Metro South Addictions and Mental Health Services in Brisbane. He's also a research fellow at Griffith University and a research policy officer at Equally Well. He completed his doctorate in measuring and positively influencing physical activity behaviour in adults with mental illness. And in his current role, he takes a collaborative approach to translational research in health services, implementation and dissemination. Simon is part of the discipline of psychiatry and mental health at the University of New South Wales, Sydney, and is co-lead of the Nutrition, Exercise and Social Equity, or NExuS group. His research focuses on the intersection of physical activity and mental health, particularly for populations exposed to trauma and social disadvantage. Please join me in welcoming Dr. Justin Chapman and Professor Simon Rosenbaum presenting Exercise as Treatment. Justin, I'll hand over to you.
Thanks a lot, Andrew. It's such a pleasure to be here today. I always enjoy the opportunity to work with Mindgardens. So I'm just going to get my slides up. I guess my research has been in health services change and implementation. I'm about 9 years post PhD. So in the academic world, your life begins once you have PhD conferral, and then every year after reduces your chances of more funding success. So I'm in mid-career land, and in the next year or two, I'll be progressing into what's can be referred to as an established researcher. And you're expected to have greater output, greater impact over that time. So I work in Griffith and Metro South, which is a hospital health service here in Queensland. So we call them HHSs. I can see by all the names on the screen, most people in New South Wales where they're called LHDs. So if I refer to HHS, I'm talking about the health and hospital and health services. And I work with Equally Well. That's a national initiative. Andy and Simon are both ambassadors, and it's focused on improving the physical health of people with mental illness. So over my time, I've had a few different phases to my career, and there's some really great learnings that I'd like to share. My work is generally not psychosis specific. I take anyone into my research, anyone who will say that they are recovering from mental health issues, but because of the partnerships in hospital and health services, community mental health organisations, a good proportion tend to have psychosis or psychotic disorders. I don't want to take up more than half hour, so I'll try not to rush too much, but I'll get straight to the point with where we're going with this. So in brief, it's very well known that people with mental illnesses, and particularly severe mental illnesses such as psychotic disorders, have a shortened life expectancy compared to the general population. This is on the order of 10 to 20 year life expectancy gap, which is huge. And alarmingly, it's largely due to preventable physical health conditions such as cardiovascular disease and diabetes. And they have a higher risk of other chronic diseases, including osteoporosis, and can experience lower quality of life, not just because of the symptoms of mental illness, but also the psychosocial disadvantage that's associated with these conditions. They can lead, psychosocial disadvantage can lead to mental illness and also compounds distress and can lead to further readmissions. So my work has been on focus on lifestyle interventions with a strong focus mostly on exercise. I got into this area as a personal trainer and just wanting to work with mental health organisations and provide exercise support for people with mental illnesses. And just as I was finishing my PhD, I started working with PCYC Queensland, and we got some funding from Partners in Recovery. This is back in 2015, 2016. In Metro North area of Brisbane, we did some pilot projects, just 8 weeks, delivered by personal trainers and chefs that were employed in PCYC, or we could contract them. Over the years, it's evolved to focus on NDIS funding with allied health, exercise physiologists and dietitians. And with my research role and government roles, been able to access whatever funding was available to help keep the program alive. It is a tiring journey trying to keep something funded where there is no dedicated funding. We've had some success, so it's been acknowledged for its impact. And the biggest success story really is in far north Queensland, where the Cairns and Hinterland Hospital and Health Services have invested a significant amount of funding over 7 years. I'm no longer directly in PCYC. I used to be the state manager for that program, but as things happen, I've had to progress on. But the program is still happening there. So I've broken this up into 4 phases. Right back in the beginning when we got Partners in Recovery funding, it was 1 hour exercise and 1 hour of social support where we would go out to a cafe. There was some funding to buy people a coffee and we had a chat. I'll put the papers down there where you can go and find out more about the findings, and these slides will be shared after the presentation, so you can always look it up later. It was a small pilot. We had about 100 referrals, about half of those inducted, and about 2/3 of those completed the program. A good proportion of people with mental health issue that may be accompanied with psychosis because of the referral pathways. So we had the Metro North Hospital Health Service as a big referral pathway and some of the partnering NGOs. So after the 8-week programs, we engaged people in focus groups to find out about their experiences. People generally wanted to get involved with the program just to mix it up. They wanted something to do. They wanted a community to be involved with. They wanted to do something good for their health. Just wanted to get out of the house, move more, feel better. And some people did just want to come and do it to get the gift card. So if they came along, did the assessments, they got some remuneration for that evaluation component. But most people wanted something to do and be a part of. While they were in the program, they maintained involvement as they felt cared for. So it was a comfortable place, supportive environment. They felt included. They felt like there was effective communication and interactions. It was part of a group with people with similar experiences, so they felt comfortable sharing some of their experiences with the group. And they felt like it was a welcoming environment with compassion, genuineness, flexibility to be a part of. And it's the same kind of things that would keep anyone involved in any kind of a program or initiative. If you go to the gym and you really don't feel comfortable with the facilitator or the group, you're less likely to actually stay involved. People maintained, after that 8 weeks, they maintained engagement with the gym because they got a free gym membership. But most of the time when they did, it was because they were feeling those benefits. They started feeling better, functioning better, happier. They reported an increased ability to cope with life's challenges. They've said things like the program has had a life-changing effect. The benefits generalized to other parts of their life. So people said that after doing the program, they actually decided to go and do volunteer work. It's something they've always thought about, but they never actually had that impetus to go and take that next step. But seeing success in this program led them to make other changes. The surveys we did were about quality of life and recovery. So we used the AQUAL 8D, which is a 30-item questionnaire about quality of life, and the recovery assessment scale. We saw improvements in the mental health, relationships, coping, and self-worth dimensions of quality of life, and they correlated strongly with the hope dimension of recovery. So people's attitude toward themselves in their self-worth changed over the course of the program, and that changed and improved their outlook for the future. And these are all important processes for mental health recovery. So in summary, people wanted something to be a part of, something that's different than what they usually get access to. They felt a welcoming venue, comfortable group, and an accommodating facilitator helped keep them involved. And then the experience of benefits enabled them to continue and removing of barriers. So they knew the venue, they were comfortable with the space, they were able to keep on coming. So there were some experiential outcomes from the focus groups of that first initial program. Attendance to the group was relatively high, so 60% attendance for all participants, and those who completed the program obviously had a higher attendance, but use of the gym membership outside of the sessions was fairly low. So I started thinking about, well, how can we improve motivation? There's some motivational theories, so we split up these two different groups. One which is just an exercise physiologist providing supervised exercise and gym membership, and another one where we just focused on conversation, motivational coaching, self-monitoring using a fitness tracker. It was 8 weeks and people had their choice. So this is now up in Far North Queensland where we got a bucket of funding to trial these two programs in a community setting. The motivational group, like we said here, this was our Garmin VivoFits, so it measures steps and energy expenditure. And we had a diary for motivational coaching that we looked at each week. We talked about barriers, enablers, positive, negative self-talk, reflecting on daily activities and how to improve physical activity instead of sedentary time. We had a little bit of a framework. They got a fridge magnet at the end called Mind and Body. We looked at people's capability, motivation to enact behaviour, the kinds of physical activities and benefits and strategies they can use moving forward. And we reflected on goals at week 8. We did a dynamic goal setting process. So at the beginning, we used SMART goals, and then each week we reflected and changed those as people decided they did or did not want to do one thing or another. And then at the 8th week, we then set goals for another 8 weeks. The supervised exercise program also had a diary, and it was based on improving capability of exercising in the gym. People tried a range of exercises under exercise physiology instruction, rated their enjoyment of it, and by the end of the 8th week, they consulted with the EP about what they liked to do and had a balanced program they can continue doing moving forward. And we looked at outcomes through a self-determination lens. So motivation in self-determination theory is on a spectrum from externally driven motivation, where someone is telling you to do it, introjected, where you feel guilty if you don't do the behavior, identified, where you see the value in doing it, integrated, where it starts to become part of your identity. So I'm a jogger, for example. I'm a soccer player, and you do that exercise because it's who you are. And then internal motivation is where you do it for the interest and enjoyment of the activity itself. In order to internalize motivation and progress up to be more self-determined, there are 3 things that need to be in place. The feeling of competence, mastery, which can be enhanced through positive feedback, learning and development, and internal and external evaluations of improved confidence. Relatedness, social connections, sharing similar journeys, being valued by society, and autonomy, having self-direction, volition, freedom of choice in the behavior. And that helps to progress a behavior that may be externally motivated in the beginning or introjected up to more self-determined motivations. So this is published in Health and Social Care in the Community. It was a similar 8-week program, so yeah, I showed you what those 8-week ones were. And it was the group exercise or motivational coaching. A bit of a lower proportion of psychotic disorders or people with psychotic disorders in this group because we had stronger connections with the NGO and primary care sector. So it was a higher proportion female with depression and anxiety, but still referrals coming from HHS settings. Attendance rates are similar. So you can see here they're around 50 to 60%, and those who complete the program around 70 or 80%. So people with mental health challenges can do these programs as good as anyone else. Cairns, Edmonton and Mareebro, as you can see up there, is where these were delivered. And we saw the changes in self-determined motivation were more impressive, more significant in the gym group. They had improved identified, integrated and intrinsic motivation to do exercise by the end. And the motivation group did improve in integrated motivation, but the gym group was much more potent for improving motivation. But interestingly, because this study was naturalistic, people had the choice of doing both programs, there was a difference in who chose which group. At baseline, people with higher BMI, waist circumference, distress and external motivation were more likely to choose the motivation group. Whereas people who are a bit more confident jumped straight into the gym group. So these 2 options gave people a way of dipping their toes in the water. And then as we went on, people tended to then, in the second round, if they remained involved, they chose the gym, and by the 3rd round, they were all repeating the gym program. So people had this shared experience of developing competency and mastery, being a part of a group, sharing experiences of exercise that was beneficial over just motivational coaching. So in summary, giving positive feedback about performance, emphasizing the learning process, tailoring programs to people's abilities, providing options, dynamically supporting people in their journey, allowing choice, making sure that they're at the right stage of change in order to uptake this behavior, and including group exercise, social components, health information sessions, and a really personal facilitator all makes a big difference. So the next phase here, this one I just threw in the middle because it was a paper with some esteemed colleagues, and there's an international data set where we looked at self-determined motivation across 8 different countries and 600 participants. As you can see, about 40–50% people with psychotic disorders. We had self-reported physical activity and the Breck questionnaire, which looked at controlled, autonomous and amotivation. And we can see here that autonomous motivation, you can sort of make out the trend line. It's related to higher, moderate to vigorous physical activity per week. It's on a scale of 0 to 4. Controlled motivation is slightly negatively related to moderate to vigorous physical activity. And amotivation, of course, negatively related. If someone doesn't want to do the exercise, they're less likely to do it. But if someone is being externally driven, it's not necessarily helpful. It might be helpful for a period of time, but then if they don't develop that internalized motivation, they're less likely to maintain it. And interestingly, controlled motivation for exercise was associated with higher sedentary behaviour. So that's quite an interesting outcome there. Over time, they might have less physical activity and higher sedentary behaviour if they're not actually identifying the benefits. So the next step of this, exactly the two same kind of programs, was in a randomised controlled trial setting. So here we actually randomly allocated people to exercise physiology support with no motivational coaching. The exercise physiologist was said, you cannot be motivational to these people in the sense of structured motivational goal setting or interviewing. They were there for practical support. Group 2 had that more goal setting, self-monitoring, motivational focus. And we wanted to see the differences in behaviour and the mechanisms of behaviour change. We used the COMBI framework that looks at any kind of behaviour as being a combination of the individual's capability, motivation, and opportunity to do the behaviour. You can't do something if you are physically or psychologically unable to, or if you just don't have the motivation, or if the opportunity doesn't exist. So it's a very simple model of behaviour that's actually quite powerful. And then we've got these, this is the behaviour change wheel with COMBI in the middle. And there are, is it 9 or 11 intervention functions, each which have been mapped to those key behavioural mechanisms. We use things like education, persuasion, incentivisation. We decided not to use coercion for this program, but an example of a coercive behaviour change technique would be something like tax. If the government wants you to not purchase cigarettes, they increase the tax on it. So that's a coercive behaviour change technique at a population level. For us, obviously, we want to be supporting self-determined motivation. So we looked at these other ones such as training, enablement, modelling, environmental restructuring. In the protocol paper, we've mapped these behaviour change techniques out to the COMBI model. I won't go through that in detail, but the reference is there if you want to look at it. And our primary outcome was objectively measured physical activity. So these are Gini-active monitors. They provide no feedback to participants, but gives you an objective look at the amount of physical activity people did each day. This is one of mine where I woke up in the morning, drove out to a mountain somewhere. I think I went for a bushwalk at Mount Glorious here in the middle of the day, drove back home, did activities during the night. And you can just divide that up into sedentary, light, moderate, vigorous activity time. The results are reported in that paper down the bottom. So the RCT had about 60 people, 31 in one group, 33 in the other. Higher proportion of people with psychotic disorders because it was primarily focused on the hospital and health service. Similar participation rates, 50 or 60% over the course of the 8-week intervention. This is the raw data of the accelerometry. As you can see in the gym group here on the left, bit of a mess. Likewise in the motivation group on the right, bit of a mess. No clear trends, but you can sort of see some of them in this group maybe increasing a bit toward the end. Becomes clearer when we zero them at baseline. So their baseline, we just made that 0, and any subsequent week was the change from baseline, and we summed that over time. And you can see it starts to separate, where the motivation group had a marginally better increase in objectively measured physical activity over 8 weeks compared with the gym group. There was a difference in about 8 minutes per week in favour of the motivation group, which maybe doesn't have the most evidence-based health impact. But conceivably over time, that could increase more, and particularly if we had more sessions, longer duration, a motivation group could be quite helpful. But when we did a more robust analysis, it showed no significant difference. So really, in this small study, there was no real difference between groups, but we also knew that we need both practical and motivational approaches needed. If you're an academic type of person and you want to drill down into what behavioural mechanisms do what, this kind of study is useful, but we know that we need exercise physiologists and exercise support doing practical support and motivational interviewing and goal setting approaches. In this study, interestingly, we showed no change in self-determined motivation. So when this exact program was delivered in North Queensland and people were given the choice, we showed some quite potent effects on their motivation. Put people in a randomised control trial where they don't have a choice of a group and you randomly allocate them into conditions, and that tends to change the context of their engagement. Something like motivation, it's contextually dependent. Things like recovery, contextually dependent, depends on how the program, the treatment, the experience is being delivered by who. And if it's not conducive to improving motivation or recovery, you can see negative impacts. So in these kinds of settings, different trial designs could be more generalizable to routine practice than a randomized control trial. And the next step that I'll talk about is embedding this into practice. So like I mentioned at the start, North Queensland really is where most of the funding support has come from. Up there, we had a few staff changes, eventually got an exercise physiologist who was, we got a couple of exercise physiologists over time that were very effective at bringing the community together. And one time, the PHN decided to give us a 2-year contract instead of a 1-year contract, which in NGO land, it's like the unicorn. You get more than 12 months of planning to try and set something up. And in that 2 years, we're then able to have a bit of a longer term vision and set up memorandums of understanding and collaborative deeds with the organisations in the region so that we could co-facilitate the programs. We had peer workers co-facilitating with the exercise physiologist, as well as psychologists and dietitians co-facilitating. We were able to integrate with the Cairns and Hinterland Hospital and Health Service into their metabolic clinic. And all that helped improve the referral pathways. So now we're getting 100 people per year into the program. And so it was becoming more embedded. Everyone got an individual assessment and programming with the exercise physiologist, up to 4 individual sessions that allowed them to get familiar with the gym, and then they progressed into the group. It's going for 7 years, 1 to 2 sessions per week available. This is kind of how the steady state of operation of the service. About 25 people inducted every quarter, so every 3 months. And most of those would discontinue. This is over time. So over the number of years, there was a steady state where the people coming in roughly equaled the people coming out. But then over time, within the 6 months after discontinuing, and discontinuing just means they didn't attend for at least 3 months, they restarted within the next 3 months. So people coming in, coming out, new people in, new people, old people, bit of a service setting here. Roughly 48 group sessions per quarter, roughly 43 active participants every quarter across Cairns, Edmonton, and Mareeba, and 225 attendances per quarter. And it's just a bit of a, over those 3 years where we did able to pull together the evaluations, just a variation. Here, where you see a bit of a peak, that's where we got that agreement with the Hospital and Health Service and really strong collaborative relationships. So I'd encourage everyone to work across settings, not just within your hospital service, engage your community organisations. Over 4 time points that some people attended up to the whole 10 time points, but we had a reasonable sample over these 4 time points. More than 50% were retained each time. The time in between each assessment for each quarter was around about 3 months, between 90 and 100 days. But there were also a large variation to that because some people came in, engaged for a little bit, didn't see them again for another 12 months. And so the time between their baseline and their follow-up was sometimes 2 years, but we incorporated them all into the overall evaluation. We looked at session density, so the number of days per or every 10 days that people were actually doing a group exercise session. So a session density of 10% would be they do 1 group exercise session in 10 days. Most of them were around between 5 and 10%, but it ranged up to 25%. So a couple of times a week that some people were able to attend. Over half the sample did at least 10 group sessions with their time, about a fifth more than 20. And you can see here, roughly a third with psychotic disorders had a simpler self-report mechanism for reporting diagnosis. So affective disorder includes depression and bipolar, just lump them all into one for this, but a reasonable sample of people with severe mental illness. This is also in North Queensland where we had primary care and community organisation referral pathways. I really like these plots because we wanted to look at sense of belonging and quality of life. As you can see here, the sense of belonging is highest with the lowest quality of life. And I'll specify higher scores on this sense of belonging scale means highest social isolation. So all the questions are negatively worded. If they're things like, I believe I don't fit in. So people scoring high in these questions, they have the most isolation or lowest sense of belonging. And that's associated with the lowest quality of life. Quality of life goes from 0 to 1 on this scale. 1 is optimal health, 0 is worst conceivable health in each of these dimensions. And there's a non-linear relationship. As you can see here, relationships, it sort of makes sense that high isolation would be associated with low quality of life in the relationships domain. But interestingly, coping was similar. So people with lower sense of belonging had lower ability to cope with daily stresses. And I think that's an important point for improving resilience, reducing hospital readmissions, is that we need to be improving a sense of community and connection. This is the mess at the top, where you can see of the 300 participants, these are their quality of life trajectories. Overall quality of life here at the left, mental health quality of life in the middle, coping on the right. Some people started at time point 0, and then at 2 years later, they had a lower quality of life at their next follow-up. Other people had more frequent assessments, and people going up and down all over the place. That's the reality of community and mental health. But then if we put them all into T1, T2, T3 to make it a bit cleaner, and you can look at a general trend, people tend to be improving over time. Of course, we can't establish causality with this. It's implementation evaluation. So we were very conservative in our reporting, but we looked at which of the key variables might have been associated with a more positive trajectory of quality of life. Of those, only sense of belonging and social support had a relationship. People's quality of life improved at about 5% per year, so that's 0.05 over time, and that's 5% of the total quality of life scale. And if we have a look at the impact of sense of belonging or social support, that's associated with a 1% change. So, and it was the only one that came out significant, so it just highlights that it really is important. Okay, I'll be wrapping up now and giving some time for Simon. But some take-home messages are that healthy lifestyle programs are really essential and can improve quality of life, recovery, and they're valued by consumers. We need to provide the opportunity for people to engage, to improve and develop their motivation and capabilities for ongoing behaviour change. External motivation can help in the beginning. Sometimes you won't do something unless someone's strongly encouraging you, but it can be detrimental in the long term. This might just get them started a bit, but then if they don't continue and they're not enjoying it themselves, they're not developing identified, integrated, intrinsic motivations, it wouldn't be worth pushing someone further. But if they do start to enjoy it, they find whatever it is, recreation, sports, that can be associated with long-term maintenance. And as we've seen, can improve social connection, sense of belonging, recovery. Supporting that motivational journey is important, and importantly, things that about the context, the relational elements, and experiential factors are actually most critical. I think we commonly think that it's the kind of treatment that's important, but it's not. It's how it's delivered. Implementation requires ongoing evaluation. That way you can show feasibility, impact, get the next pot of funding, advocate to your executive committee that this is worthwhile investing in. Partnerships help along the way, and it always needs leadership. It can be from a grassroots person in your service just wanting to see the change, and then leadership right up to your management level is required. Integrated approaches that involve co-facilitation can help across settings, improves access and sustainability. Okay. Whew. I ran through that pretty quickly, but I think that's it for me. Yeah, I might let it go over to Simon. So Simon, as soon as you wanted to share your slides, you can kick me off.
I'm on mute. Hopefully that's working. Justin, can you see those slides?
Yes, yeah, you're on.
Beautiful. Okay, thanks so much. Thank you, Justin and Andrew and Mindgardens for the opportunity to present briefly today. It's nice to follow on from the amazing work Justin's done. I'm going to change focus a little bit into a bit of implementation stuff and just tell a bit of a story about some of the work we're doing here in Sydney and also overseas. I'd just like to acknowledge that I'm on Gadigal land here at UNSW and pay my respect to elders past and present. So as mentioned, I'm Simon, based in the discipline of psychiatry, and I co-lead a research group called NExuS, stands for Nutrition, Exercise and Social Equity, together with Dr. Scott Teasdale. And we've got lots of colleagues, I think, online as well that have been a big part of the work I'm going to talk about. For me, my main interest is in workforce capacity. So when I think about that, I think about the capability of the exercise workforce in terms of their trauma-informed skills and also mental health skills. On the other side of it, I think about the mental health workforce and what's their capacity and knowledge around exercise and how can they better work together in different contexts. And for me, and Justin touched on it as well, the quality of the exercise environment is absolutely critical. So NExuS for me is also this, what we call the nexus of unmet needs. And this is different groups that we're working with. And really it's this idea of intersectional disadvantage. When we think about exercise, all these things can interact with each other when we think about building services to meet the needs of individuals. So here we're talking about mental illness, sexual gender-based violence, forced displacement, food security, disability, loneliness. All of these factors interrelate when we think about building an exercise service that may improve or target mental health outcomes. I'll share a couple of examples that ties it together, but again, thinking about the quality of that exercise environment and also what we can do between these workforces, and two trials that were published in the last 12 months. One from Jordan, inside the Bekaa Valley, which is a big refugee context host to Jordan's host is one of the highest refugee hosting countries in the world. And this was an evaluation we did of an intervention called ClimeAid, which was literally an amazing guy from Switzerland. Beat drove a mobile climbing wall into the refugee camp and started providing rock climbing sessions to young people living there. Compared to a wait list, we showed that the intervention significantly improved mental well-being among both the host community and also people affected by displacement themselves. One of the key things, and if again we come back to the quality of the exercise environment, the coaches we had were also trained in mental health skills, and we also had qualified mental health professionals working alongside the coaches. So this integration is really key, and time again, whether we're in a high income context or a low income context, that quality of the supervision, that training seems to come out as a key factor. Similarly in Uganda, and again, work led by Dr. Davy Van Kamfort, a big randomized control trial of over 800 participants, we showed the exact same thing, a significant impact on mental health symptoms among both the host community and refugees. Again, the sports trainers in this, or the coaches in this example, were also social workers or also had a mental health qualification, which is absolutely key. So if we imagine these workforces coming closer together, so bringing the sort of exercise, physical activity, EP, physio, anyone supporting physical activity, closer to a mental health workforce, what are some of the options that we can do? We've been exploring this with the Olympic Refuge Foundation with a program called Sport Coach Plus. And Sport Coach Plus has been developed to give sports coaches working in conflict-affected areas skills and training around how to create a safer, more supportive physical activity environment. This was some of the pilot work we did in Moldova, and the aim of Sport Coach Plus is to reach 2,500 sports coaches with the idea of reaching 100,000 young people affected by forced displacement. So it's great that that's happening within the sport for development world, but there's a lot, I think, of overlap when we think about here in Australia and think about mental health services in terms of the training needs. And I saw one of the questions in the chat, I think from an EP, asking about further training. So I think that's absolutely critical. Similarly, on the other side, when we think about the mental health workforce, there's a lot of basic things there that we need to be doing around how do you measure physical activity? How do you discuss physical activity? Do mental health workforces, A, see the benefits and recognise the benefits, but B, know what to do if they are talking to a client? Do they know the local resources where they can refer? And we know this is really important as well. All of this leads to a project that I'm really excited to be able to talk about. There's a lot of people on the line that have been involved. Dr. Oscar Lederman, Dr. Grace McEwen, obviously Mindgardens, but I'll come to that, have been a huge partner. This is a service that we've created in Marrickville in Sydney, embedded within what's called the Addison Road Community Organisation. Affectionately known as Addie Road, it primarily deals with food insecurity. So that picture on the right is a food pantry that feeds somewhere between 8,500 and 9,000 people per week. So if we think about that first slide, that nexus of unmet needs, all different types of people experiencing various forms of disadvantage, economic hardship, mental health issues, can access discounted food and free food from that food pantry. There's about another 40 psychosocial services on site, including Marrickville Legal, gender-based violence services. And now we have what's called Addie Moves. And this is a free, trauma-informed, culturally responsive or safe movement space. So we try not to call it a gym. 2022, it looks something like that. And thanks to enormous amount of work, particularly from Dr. Grace McEwen and Dr. Oscar Lederman, this is what it looks like today. We've now provided over 2,000 sessions, over 130 clients. Importantly, this didn't just happen, and this was the result of a really extensive co-design process that Dr. Grace McEwen led with, and this was originally done with refugees and asylum seekers, with both service users and service providers. That process involved doing interviews with those groups, recording those interviews, analysing the transcripts, and then editing those interviews into a short film that was played back to the participants to get another round of feedback. And those short films have now been turned into teaching materials. There's some available on YouTube. The paper was published in the Journal of Immigrant and Minority Health. And we also developed this infographic, which outlines the 6 key themes. These are sort of our guiding principles. We try to think about this often within our team because it's not a, I think it's we're continually improving and changing what we're doing in order to achieve this. It's not a yes or no, we're constantly learning. So those 6 key things: cultural safety, emotional safety, accessibility, support to address basic needs, physical activity literacy, and social and community connection. And although this was done with people affected by forced displacement, I think these actually apply across the board. When we're thinking about creating a safe, appropriate exercise facility, these 6 key things can be really useful. And I'll give you some practical examples of how we're trying to do this. So firstly, cultural safety, that map on the wall, you can't see from that photo, but there's a whole bunch of pins in that map. When people come in, they are asked, we get more than 50% of our the people using ADDIMOVES speak a language other than English at home. So when they come in, they're asked what to pin what feels like home for them. And that's part of it, can kickstart a conversation. It's a great way of helping people to recognise culture and recognise where people's background. Emotional safety, you can see there's a bit of artwork on the wall that was painted by refugees and asylum seekers themselves, people with lived experience. You'll see we also have female-only times. There's blinds on the wall. This was in response to meeting the needs of the group that we were trying to target. And again, that co-design work and actually asking people what they need was critical. Translation services. So here we've got our information in more than 12 different languages. We've got access to interpreters who speak over 50 languages, thanks to some of our partners. So ensuring that we can meet the language needs of the people that we're trying to reach is also critical. 2 other key partnerships that I'll just mention. So Joy of Giving, they're an amazing charity that have given us free kids' toys. A lot of our participants are single mothers that have childcare responsibilities. Now, when we think about the physical activity guidelines, childcare, social capital, that's not things that we see usually considered. We just simply tell people go and do more exercise. But actually those upstream structural barriers that come with inequality are some of the key things that we really need to be addressing if we're going to try and actually support people to get moving. So Joy of Giving are fantastic with the toys they've provided us. And similarly, Thread Together, who are a fantastic charity providing free, brand new exercise clothing. And this isn't, these aren't sort of secondhand rubbish clothes. These are brand new designer. We get sneakers, we get activewear. So for those that don't have access to those, which is such a necessity in order to participate, the right clothing to be able to move, we can provide that free of charge. I've sort of ripped through it and we'll leave some time for questions. I just want to acknowledge a couple of people. So on the 30th of April, we celebrated our 2000th session at Addy Road. There's a lot of people to thank. So again, Grace McEwen, Oscar Lederman, Kemi Wright, who have been instrumental in setting up that service and the structures around it. Importantly, Uzma Chowdhury and Chiara Mastrogiovanni, the exercise physiologists and research students that are based at Addy, are doing absolutely brilliant work, and this wouldn't be happening without them. And really importantly, Professor Jackie Curtis from Mindgardens. Without Mindgardens support from day one, we wouldn't be running. So just a big thanks to Mindgardens and Jackie for all their support, and the entire NExuS team. I'll stop there. Thanks.
Thank you very much, both Justin and Simon. What fantastic presentations, highlighting some absolutely amazing work that's been going on. It's amazing actually what gets done and achieved, and I think even though I've heard both of these presenters before and seen them speak on these topics, I'm still in awe of what both of these guys have been able to achieve with teams that they've worked with to improve mental health through physical activity. Just in terms of questions, there's an opportunity to put in questions in the chat box now, if anyone is interested in doing that, asking Simon or Justin a question. I thought it was really fantastic that Justin was able to highlight the importance of motivation. We know that for many people that experience psychotic disorders in particular, that motivation is something that's lacking. This is particularly the case with schizophrenia, where it's actually part of the illness, that motivation is taken away. And I was really curious to ask both Justin and Simon a question around this, because Simon also spoke a lot about or referred to workforce capacity. And we've got a challenge in a lot of mental health services that we know exercise is something that can be very beneficial in terms of a whole range of things, and including mental health outcomes. But access to exercise professionals at the moment is not fantastic in most places. How do we, as health professionals, peer workers, support workers, how do we go about helping to implement some or encourage some exercise, both with the motivation stuff, so the external motivation that we can provide, but also the practical components, which Justin highlighted, are also so important at this. I'm wondering if either of you would like to comment on a way forward there.
I'll let you go first, Simon.
Look, for me, Andy, I'd think about the pathway training, how we're training health professionals. Who are our allied health professionals? What's their background? What's their exposure? What's in the curriculum? And I know there's great work happening, Oscar, Kemi, the work that they've done embedding this within, among other universities. But I think there's a huge opportunity, practicum placements, exposure, trauma-informed skills, mental health capacity as part of routine training for allied health professionals is critical.
Yeah, and I think it's building on what Simon was saying about structural inequalities. Mental health, it's been suffered from that general sort of stigma and discrimination as a field for a long time, underfunded, and some professions have a lot of engagement during their training and practicums in cardiovascular disease, cancer recovery, but mental health, it still needs a lot of development to have that same kind of traction in some professions.
Yeah, great. Thank you both for highlighting that. Is it a case of having to wait for, I mean, it's ideal, all of that stuff, the more training, the more funding and things like that to come through. Your average, mental health worker, whether they're an allied health professional, nurse, peer support worker, are there things that they can do in the here and now to help promote and support physical activity?
I guess I'll take this one first, and then you can follow up, Simon. But I think absolutely. Even having the conversation and helping enable people to think about becoming more physically active can help in its own way. The more practical it can be, the better. So I think some staff, or perhaps many staff within their role, might have the flexibility to be able to do things like take people on a walk while they're having some of their therapeutic sessions with clients. It may not be possible in many settings, but there are some staff able to do that. And the more advocacy you can do within your service by using things like all the Mindgardens resources that are online and all the evidence and these kinds of training and upskilling opportunities to say to your exec, we need to be investing some way, be it in walking groups or it's sometimes it can be a big pill for someone in the finance position to make a resourcing decision to employ an entirely new staff member, such as a dietitian or exercise physiologist, but that really is the gold standard. So advocacy on one side, and also doing your own work and showing that it works within your own capacities.
I think that sums it up beautifully. I mean, the only thing I'd sort of add to that is the idea that we need to match the resources to the needs of the individuals that we're working with. So I don't, not everyone necessarily is going to need one-on-one support and a structured clinical exercise intervention. So there is a lot of scope for group-based, physical activity promotion. Some people are going to need more, some people won't. So I think it's just making sure that on the same path, we can't expect that those low intensity interventions are going to support those with the highest needs to be able to actually participate. Yeah.
Right. There's a question from one of our participants, Maria Murphy, that's come through that is on that theme, and she asks the thoughts from you guys on mental health workers or key workers, for example, OTs, facilitating fun group-based movement in the community instead of paid trained exercise leaders. So doing things like beach cricket, wall ball, basketball, short bush walks in community settings.
I'll let you take this one, Simon.
I mean, absolutely. Again, matching the needs, matching the resources and the interventions to the needs of the individual. So, for a lot of people, that sounds great, and that would be great. That may be completely sufficient in terms of physical activity, but some people may not want to engage or may not feel comfortable engaging in that group session for a certain reason, and those individuals may benefit from one-on-one support. We need to have a range of options available, and again, to match what we're providing to what people need and want.
Yeah, I agree. And I think recreation as a way of being physically active is particularly important. That's where people do find a lot of meaning from physical activity. Sometimes a lot of people do enjoy the gym, but sometimes it can feel like a chore. So embedding as much interest around it that's, that person is interested in is a positive thing.
Yeah, great. We've got another question through from Tim McRae, and he's asked how much of the quality of effect when there's group exercise activity is attributable to the group cohesion and having a common purpose versus the exercise itself.
Mm-hmm. I don't know any research that's been able to specifically attribute it to one mechanism or another. I think some of the meta-analyses and randomized controlled trials where they're doing individual exercise in a laboratory environment, they still show an improvement in mental health. When it's in a group setting, I don't think the effect size would be much different. I'm just kind of speaking off the top of my head here, but the way it happens would be different, and maybe the likelihood of maintaining the behavior would be different if they're having more positive associations with that, not just the physiological response to exercise itself.
Yeah, great. I think we've got another question here from David Oliver, which is essentially about noticing any noticeable trend from participants in their preference modes, the preference mode to the type of exercise, e.g. strength training versus cardiovascular. I think I know the answer to this already, but I'll let you guys answer that one.
I'll let you go, Simon.
Did you had data specifically? Did you want to...
Was that around preference? Sorry, can you say that again, Andrew? What was
Yeah, sorry. It is about David's question was about preferences of the mode or type of exercise, e.g. strength training compared to cardiovascular disease. So it's just the preference that people had.
Well, we have done some, and there's a fair bit of research out there, including some meta-analyses on preferences of people with mental illnesses for engaging in particular kinds of exercise, as well as barriers and enablers. Generally, different people prefer different things. So there's nothing sort of specific there. A lot of people prefer walking. They prefer doing things close to the home at low cost. The research I've done there in my randomized control trial I didn't present on this particular one, but at intake, I asked them what their preference was from motivational coaching or gym-based exercise. So at the beginning, they provided their preference, and then they got randomly allocated, and they got what they got. Most people did prefer the gym, and when they were allocated to the motivational group, a lot of them actually dropped out at that point. So I guess that just highlights the importance of making sure it is what they want to do. It also perhaps highlights some of the bias in exercise research in terms of a lot of people getting involved with the study because they see it as a great opportunity because they just can't get access to it anywhere else. And in terms of individual preferences, yeah, that comes down to that conversation. Everyone's different, so yeah, every conversation is different too.
Absolutely. I always have Simon's words ringing in my ears from many years ago. What's the best sort of exercise to get people to do is a question that gets asked a lot. It's whatever the person is happy and willing to do is the best sort of exercise. I wanted to move on to a question that came up during Justin's presentation, and that was specifically around what we know of whether these sorts of interventions would work in older people's mental health settings and whether there was any evidence around that working.
Yeah, I saw that one come in. In terms of the age ranges of the studies here, most of them on average were around the 30 to 40, mid 40s as well. Often the range went up to 75, but it certainly wasn't a big proportion of older people in the work that I presented. It definitely does work in an older person setting. I would probably say, I mean, not working in that setting myself, probably say most of it would be individually focused. A bit hard to have a group of people who might have prevalence of falls risks in the same kind of way that we would do with general adults, but absolutely essential for improving quality of life, reducing falls that then has a huge impact on quality of life and mortality. Yeah. Mobility is one of those things that once you lose it, you're like, oh, it has a huge impact on quality of life.
Yeah, absolutely. Speaks to early intervention, but early intervention is earlier intervention. And it's always better to do some exercise at some point, no matter what stage of life you're at.
Reminds me, I've got to go to the gym.
Just quickly, we might finish off with one last question, which is from Stephanie, who's an EP working at Headspace, early psychosis in Western Sydney, and wondering about training that might be available specific to exercise physiologists relating to motivational interviewing and behaviour change. So over to you guys, whether there's any statements in particular or training that you're aware of for EPs.
Not specifically from my side. There's people that would be. I mean, Oscar, as an EP, is running mental health first aid training for EPs, and I think that is a fantastic story, an example of how we can take existing knowledge from other fields and we can learn from that. But I think maybe an email, Stephanie, out of this, we might be able to get you in touch with some of those resources. Justin, I don't know if you've got.
No, I mean, there is motivational training that's routinely offered here in the service, but it's not specifically exercise physiology.
Oscar's just put one in the chat.
Oh, right.
Thanks,
there
Oscar.
you go. Great.
Well, we might draw this meeting to a close. Thank you so much, Simon and Justin, for giving your time and your expertise and making a wonderful presentation. Really appreciate that, what you guys have done.
Thanks for having us.
Great, thank you. We had over 100 people in today's seminar, which was fantastic. I see so much virtual applause going on for you guys, which is amazing. And please keep an eye out for Mindgardens events. There's a little QR code on the screen at the moment if you want to get to our Mindgardens events page. And we look forward to seeing you at the next webinar in June. Thank you all very much.